Vienna, Austria, June 1998. A young Canadian tourist walks through Schönbrunn Palace with his wife and her father, admiring a special exhibit of jewels that once belonged to Empress Elisabeth of Austria. Cameras watch every room. Guards stand at every door. He stops in front of one piece longer than the others, a diamond and pearl ornament shaped like a star, small enough to fit in a closed hand. 3 weeks later, a museum curator notices something is wrong with that same star. It is not the original. It is a replica, the kind sold in the gift shop just downstairs. Nobody saw it happen. Nobody knows when it happened. The real jewel is already gone, carried out of one of the most heavily watched palaces in Europe by a man nobody had any reason to suspect. This is the story of Gerald Blanchard, a thief who spent 20 years staying one step ahead of police on 2 continents, and the one detail he could never stop people from getting wrong about how he did it. The refund. Winnipeg, Canada, the late 1970s. Gerald Blanchard grew up comfortable. Then, when he was 8 years old, his parents divorced, and his mother moved him and his sister to Omaha, Nebraska. Comfort didn't make the trip. By his teenage years, Blanchard was shoplifting. Small things at first: electronics, furniture, whatever a department store left within reach. On Easter Sunday, 1987, 15-year-old Blanchard and a few friends did something bigger. He found the store's alarm system and switched it off himself, then backed a U-Haul up to the doors and cleared the place out. He was arrested for grand theft. He received probation. Notice what that outcome taught him. By his own account, years later, he understood exactly why the system let him go so easily. He was a white teenager from a good school, standing in front of a judge inclined to give him a second chance. Other kids, he believed, would not have gotten the same one. He took that lesson and built a business on it. While still on probation, he started forging receipts for merchandise he had stolen, then returning it to stores for cash refunds. Within months, he was clearing thousands of dollars a week. By 16, he had saved enough to buy a house outright. The escape. The refund scheme was only the beginning. Over the next several years, Blanchard's crimes spread across multiple cities, multiple states, and eventually multiple countries. He broke into police impound lots to recover stolen vehicles before they could be processed as evidence. He was arrested more than once, and more than once, he found a way out of custody before trial. In April of 1993, that pattern caught up with him. Police linked him to a car set on fire, then to the theft of a police officer's badge, gun, and radio. He escaped custody twice within 24 hours, the second time in a stolen police cruiser. An Iowa court sentenced him to 7 years for theft and arson. He served 4, then was deported back to Canada in 1997, with nothing waiting for him there but a clean slate and a record nobody in Winnipeg had reason to check too closely. Most people leave prison looking for a way to stay out of trouble. Blanchard left prison asking a different question. The specialist. Back in Winnipeg, Blanchard later admitted exactly what that question was. Why keep running small refund scams for a few $1,000s at a time when an actual bank vault held so much more? He stopped working alone. He built a crew, the kind with assigned roles, each member chosen for one specific skill. His own specialty was security: alarms, locks, camera blind spots, the small gaps every building leaves open without realizing it. Between jobs, Blanchard lived like a man who had already made it. Multiple passports, multiple names, a wardrobe to match whichever identity he was using that week. He attended a Stanley Cup final. He sailed yachts he did not own. He rode in helicopters and drove cars worth more than most houses. He was direct about why later, when there was no longer much point in hiding it. He did not drink. He did not use drugs. His own words were that his addiction was thrill-seeking and that having things he was not supposed to have was what made him feel like somebody. That distinction matters. A man chasing money eventually has enough of it. A man chasing the feeling of getting away with something never quite does. And that difference would end up deciding exactly how far he was willing to go next. The Star. Vienna, June 1998. Schönbrunn Palace was running a special exhibition of jewelry that had belonged to Empress Elisabeth of Austria, a 19th-century royal known to history as Sisi. Among the pieces on display was a small ornament called the Sisi Star, a celestial-shaped pin set with diamonds and pearls. Blanchard arrived as a tourist, traveling with his wife and her wealthy father, the three of them playing the part of a family taking in the sights. While they moved through the exhibit, he was quietly recording the layout, the camera angles, the timing of the guards. He did not choose the Sisi Star because it was the most valuable piece in the room. He chose it, in his own words, because it was the easiest to reach, and because he simply thought it was pretty. Notice how unglamorous that reasoning is. No grand statement about royalty or history, no symbolic target. Just an assessment of opportunity, made by a man who had spent 20 years learning to recognize exactly that kind of opening. He switched the real star for a replica he had bought downstairs in the museum's own gift shop, then carried the original out hidden inside a piece of scuba gear. The theft went unnoticed for nearly 3 weeks, until Blanchard himself, watching the news from his hotel room, saw the report that the jewel on display was a fake. Police searching the palace grounds afterward found a parachute. A story began to spread that he had jumped from a small plane onto the palace roof in the middle of the night to pull off the theft. Keep that detail in mind. It will matter again before this story is over. The bank. Back in Canada, Blanchard's crew moved from museums to banks. In 2004, they targeted a Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce branch in Winnipeg that had not yet opened to the public, walking away with roughly $750,000 from its ATMs before a single customer ever used them. Investigators would later connect it to a string of similar jobs stretching across Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia, all carrying the same careful, unhurried signature. Each job added more to spend and more reason to keep going, but it also added more evidence in more jurisdictions, all slowly pointing back toward the same small circle of people in Winnipeg. The Wall. January 2007. Police arrested Blanchard along with 6 associates on charges of fraud, theft, conspiracy, and operating as a criminal organization. In June, investigators obtained a warrant for the home of his grandmother in Winnipeg. Inside, hidden in the wall, they found the Sisi Star. Alongside it were computers, a machine built for manufacturing fraudulent credit cards, and 120 surveillance tapes documenting years of work. The star that had vanished from one of Europe's most closely watched palaces had spent years sitting quietly inside a house in the Canadian prairies. In October, Blanchard pleaded guilty to 16 of the 54 charges against him, including possession of stolen royal jewels and a string of financial institution thefts. The following month, a Manitoba court sentenced him to 8 years in prison and ordered him to repay $500,000 to the bank he had robbed. He had faced a theoretical maximum of 160 years. Notice what he did not do, even facing that number. He never identified the people who had worked beside him. He alone went to prison for the Sisi Star and the bank jobs that followed it. The associates arrested alongside him received conditional sentences and walked free. A man who spent 2 decades building an identity around being smarter than everyone watching him chose, at the very end, to be the only one who paid for it. Gone. Blanchard served less than 2 years before parole. By 2010, he was a free man, telling reporters he had moved into security consulting, using the same skills that once got him into vaults to help keep other people out of them. It did not last. In March of 2017, police in Burlington, Ontario, arrested a man using the name Rick White for orchestrating the theft of gaming consoles from a Best Buy, using a fake fraud call to distract staff while an accomplice walked out with the merchandise. A rental car traced back to that name led investigators to the same Gerald Blanchard. A documentary released years later would describe him as an unreliable narrator, a man prone to exaggerating his own legend. The parachute story, the one police never fully confirmed or denied, may have been exactly that kind of exaggeration, deliberately left uncorrected by a man who, by his own admission, would rather let people imagine something more impressive than explain how the trick actually worked. So which version of Gerald Blanchard do you believe? The thrill-seeker who never wanted the money so much as the feeling of getting away with it? The loyal one who took 20 years of consequences alone rather than name a single partner? Or just a man who, even after everything, could not stop reaching for one more thing he was not supposed to have? Let us know what you think in the comments and subscribe for the next case.